Hi students, it's Lisa. So let me get started with just a story to share with you. When I was growing up in middle school and high school, I had a coach who always called me Little Cindy. Now you need to know that Cindy is my older sister's name. So this coach knew my older sister, but he always called me Little Cindy. And I always thought, it's a term of endearment, it's a sweet thing, until one day I figured out that he actually called me Little Cindy because he didn't really know my name. He had known my sister and cared about her and stuff, but he didn't care about me enough to really catch my name and to know my name. And y'all, that really hurt, because he was important to me. This coach, I had spent a lot of time with him and I had interacted with him for a long time, and yet he didn't know my name. When we have people who are important to us, people who matter to us, people we spend time with, and they don't bother to know us, it's hurtful. It makes us feel like we don't matter to them, because people using our name, people knowing our name, people speaking to us speaks worth to us. It helps us feel like we're important, like we're known, like we matter to them. And y'all, we search for those kind of relationships. We search for connections with people. We search for relationships where we can really feel like we matter to people. But the truth is, we already have that. We already have someone that we connect with. We already have someone that knows us. We already have someone who's personal and real with us, and that's Jesus. Jesus calls us by name. Jesus knows us by name. And I know that because when I look at Scripture, that's exactly how he lived. Every encounter that Jesus had, he made it personal. It's personal with him because he cares about us. He doesn't have to, but he wants to. He wants to know us personally. He wants to care about us personally. And when you look in the Bible and you see all the times that Jesus interacted with people, it was always very real. He always saw people. He always called them by name. He always made it personal with them. And one of those stories is one that we're going to kind of camp out in over this series. And it's the story of a man named Zacchaeus. Now, some of you guys may have already heard that story before, so hang with me. But Zacchaeus was an important interaction for us because we can learn a lot from his story. When we see Zacchaeus' story in Luke chapter 19, we see that Jesus was very personal and very real with him. Now, let me give you a little background because we're going to look at Zacchaeus' story over the next couple of weeks. So Zacchaeus was a Jew. He lived in a town called Jericho, and he actually worked for the Roman government. And he was a tax collector for them, which meant that the Roman government would send Zacchaeus to his own people to collect taxes from them. And it wasn't just little tiny taxes, it was huge amounts of taxes that was really hard for the people to pay. And Zacchaeus would have to go to his own people and collect that money from them and give it to the Romans. But the Bible tells us that not only was Zacchaeus a tax collector, he was the chief tax collector, which meant that he was the top dog. Like he was he had climbed the ladder in the tax collecting world. And so that meant he was pretty good at what he was doing in terms of collecting that money from his people. And not only that, but Zacchaeus was also, tax collectors in general were also known to collect more money than they were required to, and they would pocket the extra and keep it for themselves and get rich off of that. So Zacchaeus was actually getting wealthy by stealing from his own people. So you can imagine that Zacchaeus was probably not a very popular person with his own people. Like nobody would have wanted to be seen with him because he was seen as a traitor and as somebody who was working for the enemy. So Zacchaeus is in this story, and also in this story, we see Jesus. Now, Jesus has been around for a long time, and he has amassed a pretty big following. He's a pretty big celebrity now, actually. He's raised people from the dead, he's healed people, he's done miraculous things. So all kinds of people are wanting to hear him, to follow him, and to be with him as he teaches and as he goes. So Jesus is entering the town of Jericho where Zacchaeus lives, and he has this huge crowd of people following him, and a huge crowd of people has also gathered in Jericho to wait to see him come into town. And that's where we're going to pick up Zacchaeus' story. Okay, so Luke chapter 19, 5 and 6 says this. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. So here's this scene where Jesus has this huge crowd of people coming with him and a huge crowd of people waiting to see him. And Zacchaeus is in the middle of it. And what the Bible tells us is that Zacchaeus wanted to know more about Jesus. Zacchaeus didn't know Jesus, but he wanted to find out more. And because Zacchaeus couldn't go to his own people because they wouldn't even talk to him, he decided he was going to climb a tree. It does tell us that Zacchaeus was a little short, so he probably couldn't see Jesus very well, or thought maybe he would miss something if he was tried to stay among the crowd. So instead, he climbs this tree. And Jesus, as he's walking into Jericho, sees in the whole crowd of people, he sees Zacchaeus in the tree. The one man that no one would talk to, the one man that nobody would say his name, the one man that nobody wanted to even be associated with, Jesus goes straight toward him. And not only that, Jesus speaks to him and calls him by name and then invites himself into Zacchaeus' life. And Zacchaeus responds with enthusiasm, it says. He climbed down out of the tree and he went with Jesus with great joy. Y'all, that's huge because no one would have wanted to be with Zacchaeus. Nobody would have wanted to associate with him. Nobody would have wanted to even speak his name. And yet Jesus does all of that. Jesus goes right towards Zacchaeus and speaks worth and value to him and lets him know that he matters. Jesus is personal with Zacchaeus. And here's the cool thing about this story. It's not just a story about Zacchaeus. It's a story about us. It's a story about how Jesus responds to all of us. Because the truth is, Jesus knows your name and he knows my name. Jesus knows you right here, right now, today, in all that you're dealing with. Jesus knows you and he cares about you and he speaks to you and calls you by name. So what does this matter to any of us? Well, for some of you, you might be like Zacchaeus, where maybe you've heard a little bit about Jesus, maybe you're a little curious about him, or maybe you just have some questions about God or Jesus, and that's okay. Maybe now is the time for you to take a step, just like Zacchaeus did. Zacchaeus took a step to climb a tree so he could see for himself a little bit more about what Jesus was like. So maybe this is your turn to climb a tree, not a real tree, but just maybe it's an opportunity for you to start asking some questions. Maybe you can start checking for yourself about what Jesus is like. You can start reading in Luke, where we read Zacchaeus' story, or maybe the book of John. It's a great place to find out more about what Jesus is like. Or maybe in your small group, you can ask some of the questions that you're holding on to. Some of the questions like, what is God really like? Or what does God really think about me or say about me? Or how do I get to know God for myself? Why should I know God for myself? Maybe you can ask some of those questions in your small group. Maybe this is a time for you to take a step like Zacchaeus. But for some of you, many of you maybe out there, you already have a personal connection with Jesus. You've already accepted his invitation to enter into a personal relationship with him. And like Zacchaeus, you've kind of climbed down out of your tree of curiosity and you're walking with Jesus now. Well, that's great. And we're excited about that. But it doesn't end there. Because see, if it's personal for you, it's personal for everyone around you. And so Jesus doesn't just call us to be connected with him and to interact and relate to him. Jesus calls us to care for and interact and connect with others as well. In Matthew 22, it tells us that we're to love God with all of our heart and soul and mind and strength, and we're to love our neighbor as ourselves. So we're designed not just to connect with God personally, but to connect with one another personally. So for you guys, maybe it's time for you to think about, how can I make it personal for somebody else? How might Jesus want me to help others know him personally? Because many of the people around you might not know that Jesus personally cares for them until you care for them. So what's a way that you can make it personal for someone else around you? Well, here's a simple way. Learn their name. Pay attention, just like Jesus did. Look around at the people around you. See who nobody else is bothering to even know their name, and learn their name. And not only learn it, say it to them. Like, instead of passing by them and instead of just nodding your head or pretending like they don't matter, say their name, say hello, and interact with them. Maybe that's a personal way that you can model care for somebody else and help them see that Jesus cares for them personally. And y'all, that's one of the reasons we have small groups, because we believe that everyone deserves to have a place where they can feel known and loved. We believe that everyone here is loved by God and known by God, and He calls their name personally, each one of us. And we believe that there's a place in a small group where we can know more about that, where we can learn more about that with one another. So tonight, as you head to your small groups, here's what I want you to think about. One, I want you to think and talk about, why does it matter to us that people call our name or use our name? Why does that make us feel good? How does that make you feel when someone forgets your name or gets your name wrong? And why does it hurt so much? But more than that, talk about where you are personally, like Zacchaeus. Are you still curious? Do you know about Jesus a little bit, but maybe have some questions? Or have you already encountered Jesus and have a real relationship with Him? And if so, when did that happen? When did it become real for you? Are you willing to talk about that in your small group? And maybe this, how can Jesus use me to make it personal for somebody else? How can I care for somebody else in a way where they can know that Jesus values them and knows them by name? Because the truth is, for Jesus, it's personal because He knows our name and He calls us by name and He cares for each one of us. So I pray you have a great small group discussion time.